I can tell you're going to be a good audience. You know why? Because you clapped and I haven't done anything yet. So I'm Rama. It's a great pleasure to be here in Rio. The picture that you see on screen was taken 3 weeks ago in Detroit. And I like to think that I'm standing there, sitting there, thinking about the future, looking at underneath a sign that says cyber optics, kind of gazing dreamily into the future. But actually, my friends just said that's a really bad Tinder photo. The Helen Hamlin Center for Design, which I run, has done over 280 projects with 180 organizations. What I'm about to tell you is not an academic theory, it's our business practice, it's our business premise. And we've applied this from everything from products to driverless vehicles to, how many of you have been to Heathrow Airport? A few, actually quite a lot on this side, so I can't lie. This group don't travel, you guys do. So I can't lie. I have to say bottom center is some work we did on wayfinding in Heathrow Airport. And if you liked what you saw when you went to Heathrow, we did it. If you didn't like it, they executed it badly. So I'm an active designer and a design activist. Although I'm director of the center, I get out there, I get my hands dirty. I've wanted to be a designer since I was 14. Didn't want to be anything else. And I got a little bit lost along the way, but right now, you're never too important, never too busy to get out there and talk to people. So many speakers have talked about empathy. I'm going to be doing the same. But there is a problem with design, and it's really how it's seen. So how many of you have a smartphone? Trick question. In fact, there were some of you that didn't put your hands up. Kind of, where have you been living? If you take your smartphone and open SMS or WhatsApp and type in the word designer, see what happens. So just something like that. What happens is this. You get the picture of a French person from the 1940s holding a brush. So again, if anyone looks like this in the audience, stand up. And Eduardo, I think it's you. But you don't have a paintbrush. There is a real miscommunication, misunderstanding about what design is and what it can do. And many speakers have talked about this. My particular point of view is that design is about people. It's done by people, for people, with people, because of people. In fact, design is centered around people. You can't get away from that fact. Rearranging the words, it's people-centered design. And that's the term that I'm going to be using. That's what I'm going to talk about. The other term is inclusive design. So I don't know how many of you have heard of inclusive design? Wow, quite a lot of you. The British government get many things wrong. I can think of a couple, like Brexit. But they got this right. They defined inclusive design as including the needs of the widest number of people. And who doesn't want that? And that really is what inclusive design is. Your designs can address really big issues. And that was the gap. When I was 14, I wanted to be a car designer. When I was 19, I became a car designer and left after 10 weeks. Because I realized we weren't addressing big issues. You know, car designers are important. I don't want to insult anyone, but it wasn't the big issues I wanted to. And 20 years ago, in Rio, the center was still a social experiment. And the 6 founding members of the center, we found a bar just at the corner of the beaches. And on a beer mat, we mapped out the center. So it's amazing to be back here 20 years later. And the things we drew on the back of that beer mat are still true today. And I just have to say as well that I think caipirinhas really fuel creativity. So I'm going to give you a lot of tips. That's one of them. It's good to have a big vision, because some of the things we talked about was how can design change humanity? disability, visibility. And you're never too small to start. I wrote this, that even small boats make big ripples, because when you're tackling something that's really, really large, it can be daunting, it can be scary, but you should always just start at your level. And this is a picture that I took when I was flying into Singapore, and there was this little boat that was just moving through the big tankers, and it was made these beautiful patterns. So I say to you, inclusive design is also about finding what your boat is, what your water is, launch it, and make ripples. Don't be too afraid to start. Very simply put, the center is about improving life. 2 words. When we were in Rio, we had 10 pages, and it took us 10 years to get it down to 2 words. What do I mean by this? Well, I'm going to show you a video. So this is an interface, and what's going on here? Why can't she switch her TV on? Is it because she's 80, or is it because of that? 60 to 90 buttons to turn on the average TV. That's an old piece of technology, and we still haven't solved it. One of our researchers developed this. It only shows you the buttons that you need. And this is what happened when we gave it back to her.
Hold down for 2 seconds. That's once. That's once.
Say on Saturday. Well, Ben Brown is in Johannesburg for us now.
That is design. That is inclusive design. We design for delight, for aspiration, for smiles, for happiness, for mischief, not just functionality. So I want to talk a little bit about chatbots. I kind of love chatbots because everyone wants to have one. You know, you're not a company unless you have a chatbot nowadays. We were working with an accounting firm, and we wanted to do something a little different to understand what do people need from a chatbot. Most chatbots look like this, 25-year-old women. And I think it's because they're designed by 25-year-old men who then design their ideal girlfriend. When you look at gender distribution in artificial intelligence, we are making some real mistakes. Center of the screen, in the blue, most assistants are female. On the right, movie roles, most are male. Think iRobot, Terminator, etc. Are we making digital discrimination? Are we designing digital discrimination that wouldn't be tolerated in the real world? So we need to be careful. When we were looking at what a chatbot should be, this is what people said. It should have some human qualities. Don't fake it. Don't pretend it's a human being. But it should have empathy, wiseness, sincerity, curiosity, all with a little touch of happiness. And these were the kind of chatbots that we thought we would propose instead of a 25-year-old girlfriend. And we got the accountants at this company, the managers, to work with this. Is it a parent? Someone who looks after you and gently guides you? Is it a boss who tells you what to do? Or is it a friend who encourages you to not work so hard? Or is it a coach who sets you goals and makes sure that you reach them? And they chose a friend. But the friend they chose was very different. The friend wasn't the same age, gender, or cultural background as them. This was in the UK, and the friend that they wanted as a chatbot were these two, Dame Judi Dench and David Attenborough, because they felt they'd be an older, wiser friend. Dame Judi Dench would encourage you to have a caipirinha at the end of the day. David Attenborough would help you cover up if you've forgotten your wife or husband's birthday. You know, chatbots were inextricable from life. And the previous presentation, which talked about augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, really talks to this. So we work with people, and here are two projects. On the left is a project with Samsung that we did looking at how communities communicate. On the right is one with Panasonic that looks at aging and health. And our designers here are immersed in communities, immersed in what does health mean for an older person on a Sunday morning. Don't work with fake people. These are personas, and you can tell they're personas. You know why? Here's my other top tip. Look at the teeth. They're all smiling. If people are always smiling, walk away. There's a question I always ask companies when they talk about personas, and that is, introduce me to this person. And in quite a long time of doing this, no company has ever introduced me to the real version of their persona. We don't really like personas. We prefer real people. Why? There's 7 billion people on this planet. Go and find a real one. Don't make one up. A person who you have made up will always like what you've done. So I've done designs. I used to use personas back in the day, and they always loved what I did. Rama, you're a great designer. Real people will tell you what the failure points are. Personas will never tell you that you are wrong. I wanted to run through just some simple design methods, because I know there's a lot of you that are kind of into this world right now. And I just wanted to show you what it is that we do. So I feel like I'm favoring this side. I'm going to walk over here. Seeing, really important. These are all screenshots of a project we did in Hong Kong, looking at older people, care homes, and technology. Shadow people. This 80-year-old woman from the 35th floor, her apartment to the local market. Ask people what they do, but in context. And you know, this person is talking through sort of financial transactions and bank interfaces. Provoke. In design, we can provoke responses. So here, we're talking about the bed space to an older man on his bed. Future. This is Mr. Wong. Designers are good at futuring, and here we are designing a technological interface for him. He's not a persona, we just made him a cartoon character, which he really liked. And we imagined a future based on what he had said were his problems now. And then he came in and put a red pen all over them with his granddaughter, which was great. He told us where we were going wrong. Prototyping, well, we all know what that is. Co-creating, getting people to design. About 10 or 15 years ago, IDEO talked about, someone called Jane Fulton Surrey talked about not just designing for people, designing with people and designing by people. And that's as true today as it is 15 years ago. And immersing. The students and professors we had on this who weren't designers, they were medics, lawyers, etc., they actually ate at the care home, stayed at the care home, some even stayed overnight. And what they came back and said is, my God, that was an awful experience. And I said, well, design something that you would actually stay in. And that's a challenge. And the final one is the most important, listening. Listening underpins everything. And I think when you combine these, you get some really interesting pieces of design research. Research is a creative technique in itself. A lot of people think it's a pain in the arse. You've got to get it out of the way and then you get onto the fun stuff. This is a project we did with Clearblue. I'm very interested in pregnancy. Sorry, that came out wrong. But there's 104 million women pregnant in the world at any given time. And we wanted to understand what goes through their minds, what's in their heads in the first trimester, the first 3 months. And this is just a simple combination of those techniques, which asks currently pregnant women over a week to map their mood in terms of the weather, using metaphor, as Dan Lockton talked about. Where's your safest space? So you can see a yoga mat there. A bed, that's where I go to when I feel threatened or when I feel negative emotions. And this booklet was a piece of origami that we wrapped up. At the end of the project, we gave it back to the women, and we said, here is a snapshot of your pregnancy to share with your baby when they grow up. And for me, it was just that wonderful thing of gifting research. Research is creative. It's also a gift. It's also artistic. So we asked women in their 50s and 60s to write about those experiences that they remember. So we thought they would talk about the best experiences or the worst experiences. But there was a twist. We asked them to send us in a picture of their younger pregnant self, and we created them into line drawings and then asked them to write their experiences on top of that drawing. And that was a really beautiful moment of a woman in her 50s interacting with herself in her 20s and 30s. And these became a sort of artistic piece that we had an exhibition of. So I want to talk a bit about a meaty project. When we talk about interfaces, when we talk about experiences, user experiences, I want to go right to an extreme level. The scale of the city. Can the city be an interface? Can the city, not the citizens, look after the people that live there and work there? And I am going to talk about a tough issue, which is suicide. So I really hope, no one in this room is affected, but I'd understand, I'm just putting that out there that for the next 5-6 minutes I'll be talking about that. This is a live project we're doing in Northern Ireland, and it looks at community artificial intelligence in the city. It's a creative approach to suicide prevention on the River Foyle. This is a small city of 100,000 people, and there have been 1,700 incidences in the last 3 years. They have a saying there that I'm ready for the Foyle. If you've had a bad day, you go and jump in the river, and that's what that means. This is the river. It's got 3 bridges. Only 2 of them have been there recently. It divides Northern Ireland and Ireland. Lots of social, economic, and political pressures. And for years, people didn't go to the other side of the river. There was a massive social divide. As I say, 1,700 incidences logged, as you see on screen. And we've created 5 interventions with the community, with the politicians, with business. We've been out there for 3 years. We've actually had a team that has moved out there to be with the community. And I'm just going to take you through 2. So Foyle bubbles. This looks at turning these spaces where there's kind of incidences happening around the riverfront into spaces where there's culture, creativity, and color added. The bubbles are these, which are kind of AI-enabled architectural pods on wheels. And they can be given to anyone to use. Social enterprises, arts and leisure, education. But there is one rule, that they all have to undergo mental health training. If someone is feeling suicidal or depressed or has paranoia, the last people they're going to go to is the police or the hospital or the authorities or even family. But if you are by the riverfront, the idea is that your butcher or your baker or a tailor or a hairdresser might be able to be the kind stranger that comes and helps you. This is how they would light up the riverfront, kind of getting rid of areas of darkness. And this is how they might work. So they could tell a tourist something about the history or playing an Irish song about the river. They could tell a tourist where to get a pint of Guinness. A small bar is just up there on your right. And if there's some ruffians coming, some criminals, it could also keep an eye on that. Tell them you're on camera. This is being filmed. But most importantly, if someone is having a moment of crisis, could the city reach out and ask that all-important question, are you okay? And early trials show that some of this is very effective. I want to talk about Foyle reeds. This is one of the bridges, the newer bridges that has been built, and it's for cars and for people. It's 9 floors high, so it's as tall as a 9-floor building. That's the coldest and fastest flowing water in Europe. And because the handrail is very low, it's about this high, waist high, it's a place that people go to commit suicide and jump off that bridge. What the community didn't want was a fence with barbed wire. And if we could drop the volume on that. One of the things we did was actually to go out there, and it's really important you don't design from a distance. This is the boat that actually comes to rescue people, and what you see there, a video of me looking very cold and scared, is them enacting a response time. So if someone's on the bridge threatening to jump, the boat is around the corner. When someone jumps, they have 20 seconds to reach that person. And these volunteers, the search and rescue, were in tears telling us some of the stories. Like they just managed to get to someone who just went under. One of them reached over and managed to just grab her hair as she was going down and pulled her back out by her hair. And she said for the first time in her life, she felt that someone was actually reaching towards her to help her. And every month, she now writes to them to say, I'm still alive because of you. So it's a powerful, powerful moment. Important as designers, we don't distance ourselves from that. One of the things we noticed around the river was these reeds. And we started to build them up into prototypes. So it's why it's called foil reeds. They're basically 9-foot-high representations of the grasses. But they're also beautiful. They are also enabled with a little bit of AI. They're enabled with lighting. They could be controlled by a smartphone. So different families could control a different section of the bridge. At Halloween, the lighting could change. And the idea is that you turn this place where people go to end their life into a place where people go to celebrate their life. The city becomes an expression of experience. And I just want to show you here a little, this is a very early movie of how they're being built. There's a lighting company in Sweden that's creating them. This is how they would look on the bridge during the daytime. There's currently about £25 million worth of investment that may go into this project. If it does, it will be the largest urban installation in Ireland. But instead of a barbed wire fence, it becomes a point that can draw people's attention. And as I say, a point of celebration. So I want to switch gears and talk about driverless cars, another type of interface. This was a project we did with the UK government. They got something else right. They gave a bunch of people a lot of money to talk about driverless cars. And, you know, the question when I say, what is the biggest barrier to driverless cars, it's not what you think. It's not technology, it's take-up. It's people's hopes and fears around it. How will it be introduced? What are people's reactions to it? And that's what we were brought in to look at. This is the very first driverless vehicle. And people often quote this as the experience they want this day. They talk about seamless, magic carpet ride. And of course, we did all the wonderful design thinking things that people do. I have to include this slide because it has post-it notes. But what was really interesting is when we were asking people to design their own driverless vehicles, using things like Lego. So bottom center is a driverless vehicle that is actually a house. And what came from that, we actually spoke to a hotel chain about what if a driverless vehicle was a hotel room. So you checked in, went to sleep, and you could go to sleep in Rio and wake up in Sao Paulo. And the driverless vehicle, it could actually make sure that it doesn't tilt. We also stole a driverless vehicle from Heathrow Airport to actually test out with people. So we didn't design it. But here we are testing it out with many, many different types of people. We asked people what sort of interfaces would they use, and we got them to design them on paper. And the act of doing that in context was much richer than those design thinking workshops. Being a creative college as well, we also just wanted to push the boundaries of what could these things be. So we set many, many different creative briefs to a bunch of people, from 8-year-old school kids to people in sort of older people on the street. And our own designers came up with a range of things that point to a future. One of the things is, how does the vehicle interface with the city around it? How does it show intention? So if you're walking across the road, you look at the driver and you look at the person's eyes, and if they look crazy, then you don't cross the road. How do you tell where a driverless vehicle is going to turn? And this is modeled on the nose of a dog, because if you look at where a dog's nose is sniffing, you can see where it's going to run. So it's about that intentionality. It'll twist and turn. This is redefining the sports car. What if a vehicle was actually a car you could do sports in, so you could swim your way to work? Or what if it was a meeting room that you could dial up when you're in the city, and you could just have a meeting room, or if you just needed some peace? Or what if it was a smaller vehicle the size of a photocopying machine that brought you noodles when you've had too much to drink, or was used for Amazon delivery? And this was my favorite one. What if Uber gets banned in certain cities? What do they do? And we cross-reference that with the social challenge, which is toilets are getting closed down. So what if Uber sent you a toilet when you needed it? We call it the Uberloo. So if you design for people who have the greatest needs, who are at the margins of consideration, you'll get the mainstream markets as well. And these are just some of the things that we look at. How can artificial intelligence support people with dementia, autism, or cognitive overload? And I guarantee you've all had a cognitive overload equivalent to dementia in the last 24 hours. So hands up in the room, how many of us have been stressed? Yeah. So want to talk a little bit about just interfaces in the medical arena, because we do quite a lot of that. I should say here that second from the bottom is looking at how can virtual reality improve health and rehabilitation. And we're involved in projects, everything from kind of virtual surgery to people with paranoia who may be scared of even a simple thing like going out to a cafe, a restaurant, or a shop. Virtual reality has got so good that you could play through some of those scenarios and show them different types of scenarios that they may encounter, and actually sort of train, coach, and reassure. So going into the hospitals, one project we did with King's College London, which is a teaching hospital, was looking at people with paranoid thoughts. 1% of the UK is diagnosed with paranoid thoughts. And you can see our designer, Anna, in the center, the clinical psychologist, Amy, is to her right, and there's clinical staff around. Psychosis can affect anyone. We can all have a paranoid thought. Why didn't that person say hello to me when I waved at them? Why is it raining today? It could be anything that hits us. And one of the things we designed, I can't show you the interface, so this is a very early stage mock-up, but it's called Slow-Mo. And it's a service, it's an interface, it's a user experience. Slow-Mo stands for slow down for a moment. And one of the things I can talk about is if you put your paranoid thought in a spinning bubble and graphically represent how fast it's spinning in your head, and then you physically slow it down, it'll actually slow it down in your head. And that was an incredible thing. This experience is going through medical testing, because we don't just want to throw it on the market. It's going through 2 or 3 years of medical testing. And I have to say we made a mistake, because we thought it was just for paranoid people, and then we realized it's actually for everyone. Here's about UX in a critical space and the importance of involving people. This is Lais. She's from Portugal. She's another one of our designers. And here she is doing design research by actually helping nurses make up beds and talking to them. It's a wonderful way of just getting a conversation going. And she was working in critical units. There is a problem in almost every hospital in the world, which is beds. You know, bed blocking, not enough beds. So this cartoon says, we are not visitors, we are just waiting for your bed. And it's kind of true. Intensive units look like this. They have lots of machines, lots of interfaces. We thought we were going to be designing the machine. And again, we were wrong. Talking to the clinical staff, what they said was what they needed was an interface that actually told them where the patient was and how they were doing. And that was an absolutely blinding insight. If not, we would have just redesigned this stuff. What they needed was something else. And we co-designed with them. We gave them the tools of design to create this, which is basically a patient flowchart from admission through to discharge, using a simple traffic light system to say if a task has been completed or not. The idea is that a nurse could look across the room and tell where a patient is in the process and what needs to happen next, instead of reading 5 different charts. And this could be digital, it could also be physical. So that one's going through trialing in three hospitals. The other thing is to be predictive. So I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. Or the other way is people-centered design. Because you're looking at what are people's needs, aspirations, and perspectives now. Then using design to throw that into the future. So when I look at our back catalog of projects we've done, especially the technology ones, I realize sometimes we've been quite predictive. So I'm going to show you a project from 2007. How many of you remember a company called BlackBerry? Yeah, they were there. In the glory days, we really worked with them to use people-centered design to change things. And one of the things we told them was, BlackBerry has enabled work to happen outside of the office. How does it enable life? And the second thing we told them is, you won't be saved by business people. You will actually be saved by a teenage girl. And that was based on me observing my cousins at that time running up a $300 US dollar phone bill a month. And BlackBerry messaging was something that was born out of that, and that started off WhatsApp, WeChat. At the time, they didn't realize what a big thing they were sitting on. But they came to us and said, there's a radical new technology coming. Can you look at how this digital interface could change the physical world? And that radical new technology was called Wi-Fi. Incidentally, it still doesn't work in the bloody hotel, but but this is a little video that we put together. And at this point, the first iPhone was just coming out, screen technologies was just coming out. So I just want you to have a look at this video and see how many things have actually come to pass. So it is based in a hotel room. There's a couple in their mid-30s. He travels for work. She's back in the UK. And it's how they connect. So he says, are you ready for our run then? And the whole idea was we were going to have a mixed reality kind of race between him in Tokyo, her in London, but we ran out of money to make the movie, so you don't get to see it. But it's interesting, two of the big insights that sort of inform some of those was number one is when I travel, how do I bring my home with me? And number two was how do I know my partner's awake without ringing them? Because the partners kept on saying, this person is abroad, and they keep on waking me up in the middle of the morning, in the middle of the night. And that was the idea of that little purple light. So I'm going to end off with just talking about a personal area of research, which is creative leadership. This really started off with realizing that as creatives, if we're in leadership positions, actually companies do better, and there's a lot of stats, a lot of data that kind of show that. What creative leadership is, it's a process that enables people to tap into their creativity and their potential to lead. So have a belief that everyone can be creative, and everyone can lead. But quite often, it's the loudest, tallest, malest people that are put in leadership positions. And that wasn't me. When I was at school, I was told I'd never be a leader. So I'm going to take a selfie up here and send it to my headmaster. The research brings together two fields of design and neuroscience, and it's emerging. It's based on three values that make you a creative leader, which are empathy, clarity, and creativity. So I always say empathy I learned as a human being, creativity I learned as a designer, and clarity I learned from an ex-girlfriend. And don't look at me like that, people. You've all had that relationship. Designing with empathy is important. So many people have talked about it, including McKinsey. And don't design with ego. Because the rise of the empathic leader is unstoppable. We see this again and again and again. And designers have empathy at the heart of what they do. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for on the left of the screen. Empathy is being there with someone. And I love this quote from the Indian poet Tagore. He said, "Power said to the world, 'You are mine,' and she imprisoned him on her throne. Love, or empathy, said to the world, 'I am yours,' and she gave him the freedom of her house." So don't be imprisoned by your design efforts. Use empathy and be free. And that is design. That is inclusive design. Clarity. Well, clarity is not consistency. Clarity is not authoritative. And I apologize to any cat owners in the room for making cats look bad. But it's collaborative. Clarity has many aspects, but one of them is communication. Clarity of communication. Audi, when they did their first small car in the late 1990s, this car had a one-sentence brief. It was, can you drive 4 people and their luggage from Hamburg to Munich on 1 tank of petrol? And in that is everything you need to know. The car had to be made of aluminium instead of steel, so it was actually light enough to do it. The engine had to go half under the floor in order to be the length it needed to be. So that simple statement drove many design decisions. And even Hollywood, we've all heard of Hollywood. Everyone heard of Hollywood? Good, good. Another trick question. They use a log line, which is 50 to 100 words to describe a film. So, can you guess what film that is? Any takers? Thank you. Of course. And this is how they sell movies. They sell it on that 50 to 100 words. Here's another one. What's this one? Titanic. Give that person a prize. So finally, the third aspect is creativity, which is so linked to design, I'm not really going to talk about it. But design, I define as the act of creating, inclusive design as the act of creating together, very simply. And creativity is not the same as originality. You know, it's not about looking good, it's about doing good, just to bring it back to empathy. Originality, sometimes clients often go for that, but creativity can come from empathy. It can come from so many different regions. And I want to go back to this thing of even small boats make big ripples, because I had to eat my own words. I had to take my own advice, because I've been running workshops in this for about 5 years, and I've never published. We've trained Hong Kong civil servants, the police department, we've trained big multinationals from Japan. And I realized I had to put my boat on the water, and the reason I didn't publish is I didn't think creative leadership had any legs. I didn't know whether it would be a viable idea. And it turns out that it did. And this year there have been so many areas of support. So I'm actually trying to live and breathe my own advice. And what happened when I first published it was a Hong Kong magazine published it. And I was just supremely happy because George Clooney was on the front cover. And Sarah Jessica Parker wrote the article next to me. And the editor said, I'm tired of just writing about more luxurious material and design. I want people to see what design really is. I want them to see social design, inclusive design, design that matters. And I want them to know the leadership quality that design has. So I was very proud. And I know what you're all thinking. You can't tell George Clooney and myself apart. You know, I often have that problem. It's like we're twins separated at birth. So I'm going to finish off with some top tips. Number one is design experiences, not products, spaces, or systems. Everything you do is an experience. When we worked with Samsung 10 years ago, we told them 2 things and 2 things only. One is stop talking about technology and start considering people. And the other thing was design experiences, don't design products. A smartphone is not a product, it's an experience. And they did send 16 of their team to study with us for a few months. And they were the team that eventually designed the Galaxy S3, S4, S5, S6, but not the batteries on the S7. The next is design for people, not users or consumers. We always say, and I'm guilty of this as well, we talk about users or consumers, but who in human history has ever said, hi, I'm Rama, I'm a user of sliced bread? Or, I'm Rama, I'm a consumer. That sounds like a really bad introductory line. Users use, consumers consume, but people live. So design for people, design with people, see the whole dimensions of a lived life. I want to remind you again that don't design from a distance. Really, really important. And you can get all of this right. You can design the most enabling, the most magical, the most wonderful, and the most empathic experience. But above all, please, please, please make sure your spelling is correct. And it took me 3 months to realize that should say bamboo shoots. So final slide is this. If you wish to reach out with any questions, I'm on many different social medias. Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and another one that just got hacked that I can't bring I can't bring myself to say the name of. And then there is also a little more inspirational Instagram at Life Whispers. So thank you very much. So, any questions? Or are we all ready for caipirinhas? Here we are.
Well, hello. It's a pleasure to see this lecture. It's like great talk. This made me I was thinking a lot of how I'm doing design. I was like thinking more like systems, operations, and stuff like that, and actually forgetting the good experience of everything. So I just like say thank you for sharing your experience. That's it. I don't have a question actually, but I just say thank you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you. I'd just like to say to you and to everyone, thank you.
Hi. I will say in Portuguese because I'm a little shy. Eu queria saber, assim, gente, comunicação é o tema, acho que de tudo que a gente faz. E eu sinto que existe uma questão, muitas vezes a gente muito duro consigo mesmo e empático com as outras pessoas. E eu acho que dentro da própria comunidade de design a gente às vezes reage dessa mesma maneira. E eu queria saber como que a gente pode usar esse tipo de coisas para criar coisas melhores dentro da nossa própria comunidade de design.
So I remember saying to someone with surprise that designers are human beings too, and part of creative leadership is actually starting a communication with yourself. So if I understand your question correctly, communication isn't just an external thing, it's an internal thing. So when we run workshops, when we employ people, we start that internal dialogue. Where is your level of clarity, creativity, empathy? Where is your heart, your head, your hand? When you understand that about yourself, I think it becomes more powerfully expressed as a designer. The other thing is not to turn away from a hard truth. So I can tell you all a secret if you'll not tweet it. And that is I'm a very bad designer, actually. Or maybe I'm not a very bad designer, but I'm not a great designer. But what I do realize I could do is create a vision, have a sense of empathy, have a sense of purpose, and bring other people into that. So it was horrible when I was 23 and I realized, yeah, I'm an okay designer. And it took me a while to figure out the other things. But it was that communication with myself that set me on a path. So all of this work, I should say, it's a massive shout out to the team of people that are there, the 35 people back at the center, and the 180 that we've worked with over the years, because, you know, one thing I just do as director is surround myself with very clever people, and then I look clever. I hope that answered your question.
Hello, Rama.
Okay.
Aqui, here. Olá, Rama. I will ask in português. Pensando no Jazz McMullen, uma vez um designer, ele criou uma escala de design e o primeiro estágio dessa escala era a respeito do design inconsciente. O design inconsciente normalmente nos traz uma acessibilidade por acaso. Pensando nessa questão, o que de fato falta para as empresas inserirem o processo de design inclusivo no planejamento das empresas? É uma questão de conscientização ou é uma questão de adaptação, entendimento, planejamento? O que de fato falta para as empresas inserirem isso no processo?
So I'll tell you what isn't missing, and that's fear. So I'm going to quote a great philosopher here. He's called Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey gives a great talk on YouTube at a graduation for a management university, and his final words are these. And they actually really, really spoke to me when I thought I couldn't be the director of the center, and I nearly didn't apply. And these words actually changed my life, so I want to share them with you. He said to the graduating students, when you walk out of that door, you will only ever have two choices in this world, love or fear. Always choose love, and you will never be untrue to your playful heart. That's what's missing. I think the other thing you talked about, conscious, is in the many boardrooms that I've been in, with the many organizations I've talked to, people lack conscious choice. So people do things because this is the way we've always done it, or they do things in a command and control structure. You know, not even the military, is top down. You know, if a soldier on the front line sees something, they feed that back up the command chain, and it can change a whole decision. And if the military can do it, then so can we. Unfortunately, in corporations, the understanding of that is just happening. There is a tide change. There is a changing of the tide. There is a rise in consciousness, and that's the good news. But to simplify it down to those two choices of love and fear, that's one thing. The bigger answer would probably take about 2 hours, and I would need a beer in my hand for that. So we'll talk about that outside. There we are.
Aqui. Primeiro, muito obrigada pela sua palestra. Primeiro, muito obrigada pela sua palestra. Ela tocou profundamente meu coração. Assim. Nos últimos meses, eu tenho me dedicado bastante para o design inclusivo e tenho lidado com coisas muito fortes, desde violência contra a mulher, quanto acessibilidade, hospitais públicos no Brasil e principalmente jovens negros das periferias que sofrem violência da polícia e estão tentando empreender com tecnologia. E isso me faz cada vez mais sempre olhar para causas que eu preciso me dedicar e trazer o design para isso. Eu que tenho um histórico de vida corporativa e ter trabalhado num banco, eu queria saber, ouvir de você, quais são as causas que te interessam e que cada vez você tem olhado para isso. Se a gente pode chamar de causas, mas esses interesses, já que você trouxe a questão do suicídio e de questões que estão borbulhando no mundo atualmente.
Sure. What's your name?
Samili.
Samili, it's my great pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I have to say, I love what you said, and a round of applause for what you do. So what drives me personally, I think for many people that are in this work, something personal happens. It's a grandmother who can't get in the bath anymore. It's a neighbor who's experienced violence. It's a child who may have been abused, or it's a homeless person on the street that's always outside of their doors. For me, the philosophical answer is actually a very powerful thing. And I used to get very angry at the news. You'd see the news and get very angry at how can people do this to each other. And then there's something more powerful than anger, which is the gentle power of dissatisfaction. And just that dissatisfaction, and it is a gentleness, the power, if you can put yourself behind that, it's incredible. And what I find now is I try to be open. I do a lot of yoga, and I try to channel what is it that comes in through the door of the center, and what is it that we need to attend to. We were scared to get into projects around autism, dementia, and 7 years ago we did. So it's a sense of humility, a sense of empathy with absolute strength takes you through this. So I think just to sum up, anything, we would take on anything as long as it's not to do with drugs, alcohol, or weapons. But anything that really comes back to those two words of improving life, And it's improving life within, it's without, it's around. And you look out, and the gains you get within are just absolutely amazing. It's a wonderful life. I'm very blessed to do this, and very proud to meet all of you. It's my honor. Thank you. Okay.